everybody, we are officially live. I'm so excited to dive into another pre-symposium panel. A pre-symposium panel is a gathering of leaders who are going to be at our upcoming executive symposium next week in Dallas at Roche Beaubois. It's a high-end furniture store on June 12th. The topic is getting team buy-in to business transformation. And so a pre-symposium panel brings leaders that are going to be at the event together to share their insights, their knowledge, their perspectives on what they're finding to be effective when it comes to getting team buy-in to business transformation. We've got three great leaders here with us today to share their thoughts. We've got Josh, we've got Alan, we've got Samir. Josh, you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Josh Reeves here. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a company called The Work Loop, and we operate high-end interpreter services, customer service CX out of the U.S. and Honduras.
Very nice. Alan, how about you?
Alan, yes, how you doing? I'm Alain Lee. I've been in quality and quality control and lean Kaizen. I'm here in Texas.
Very nice. Samir, how about you?
Hi, my name is Samir and I am CTO of Catnate Top. We basically help individuals in the company find soft skill personality of the people so that they can personalize the growth plan, upskilling, up movement, and learning strategies for them.
Very nice. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision is a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they're there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. We believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. One of the ways we build community is by having our executive symposium. So let's dive in, y'all. So topic for today, getting team buy-in to business transformation. I think one of the biggest topics within getting team buy-in into business transformation is, rather maybe the biggest hurdles, I think, is this disconnect between the executive team and these visions of grandeur and all the things that they're trying to achieve, and then everybody else has actually got to go about implementing it. And they're like, why the heck are we doing this? And sometimes it's like an us versus them mentality where like you've got department heads who are like, screw the executive team. I don't know why they're making these changes. We're fighting on or whatever. And it just creates a lot of frustration and strife between the two. I guess to kick off the question, maybe I'll just start with why. Where do the kind of big gaps, where often do you see the biggest gaps, especially from the executive team's decision, okay, we're going to go in a different direction, we're going to make this new change, and then it falls flat with the team? Where are the typical, I don't know, fall short points and that an executive team oftentimes overlook or just don't acknowledge as really critical to the process of getting that team buy into business transformation?
I think for me, if I could go first, Garrett, the one of my steps along the way and how we build and change culture when I'm starting or moving companies for people is you have to create this culture of inclusion. And so often we get this idea that the executive leadership or the CEO, the founder, they have all the answers, and they don't. They have the vision. And so you have to create an inclusive culture within your company so that you can get feedback and input from people that are going to carry out the changes, right? So rather than dictate the changes, you help them be part of the solution. That motivates them, that helps them feel inclusive, heard, all those things. And then they know what they're going and why they're going to carry out that project for you, rather than we just come out, tell them move block from A to B and that's it. That's just, you have to create that inclusive culture so they understand why they're doing it.
Right.
Yeah,
yeah, sorry, if you want to go ahead.
Go ahead, Samir.
Okay, so what I have seen mostly is there are expectations and reality, right? Leadership usually have expectations, and the people below leadership or the subordinates of them, they live in the reality, which is they might have 20 deadline and 30 work pressure, and then you add one more thing, it feels like that leadership is attacking them and trying to boss manage them, which is adding more things onto their plate. So that they have to do something else. And there is always a looming fear on head of employees. If we see in the current environment, which is if you don't do this, you might be ousted from the company, right? If every employee lives in that fear, the first auto emotion is to reject every notion that leadership is throwing. If you won't do it, then there is no method on which you can be judged and you can be ousted from the company or anything that happens to your livelihood. I think that's where the psychological gap is there. One, which is expectation, where all executives thinks that if this happens, then everything will be great. And then the reality of the situation where the employees are already overburdened and they have a psychological fear that whatever new is coming is going to get them out of the job rather than help them with the job, because there is no fact to support the second argument, which is it is going to help them with the job. Every tool, every technology that is out there, we promote it as it will cut down your cost, which is whenever in business terms we call about cost, it is about the human resource. So I think that's what I think the issue is.
Well, I think both of you make valid points, and just keying in a little bit on Josh's point and taking it a little bit further on the inclusion piece. What I think falls short is we want to include people, but we don't really translate what that value is. And so, Samir, you're talking about the emotional piece of adding more onto an employee, that reality of I've got these tasks that I've been given, and now you're going to give me some additional things to go do because you've got this grand idea. What tends to happen is that translation that Josh mentioned, with including, the resources in, what the is or what the transformation is translating what that value is into the reality. And so when everyone in the organization understands what their value is within the entire food chain, they are then having a little more emotional buy-in and accountability to actually going in that direction. Because I now see the things that I do are actually adding value to the company bottom line. And you're right, when we talk about cost reductions and we talk about lean and we talk about getting, streamlining things, people tend to believe, oh, we're going to lose resources. And so that becomes an emotional, halo over their heads that says, we're going to start reducing force. And so that's not necessarily the case. Being a quality professional, one of the challenges I have is when we talk about going lean and eliminating waste within an organization, people always, first thing they think about is, oh, we're going to start trying to eliminate jobs. And so that's not necessarily the case, because when you can increase capacity, you are now lining yourself up to scale and you're lining yourself up to grow. And so if the leadership and organization can articulate the fact that if we can increase capacity, then we can increase our growth potential and be ready for the upswings of what our customer demand may bring. So
I love that, man. Guys, you got to give me a lot to work with here. This is juicy. This is fantastic. So, Josh, I'm going to start with you, playing a little bit of devil's advocate here. I mean, Alan, I hear what you're saying of like, it's hard to translate the value unless we can get that emotional buy-in and accountability into what is going on here. Um, Josh, you bring up this concept of like a culture of inclusion, and I think like in a theoretical, like perfect world, a culture of inclusion absolutely makes a ton of sense. In reality, if we're talking about scaling this for thousands and thousands of employees, it can be really hard because if everybody thinks that they've got an equal vote for what direction the company's going to go into, you're going to have thousands of separate directions in which everyone thinks that the company can go into. I mean, shoot, I was chatting with the CEO earlier this week, and he was saying, "Oh, we brought in a consultant to come in and help us like hone in on our vision." And everyone had their own idea of what the vision should be. And then, this consultant's like, here's your final report. Here's 50 different visions and good luck. And he's
Yeah.
like, what the heck? Like, everybody doesn't have an equal vote. So I guess maybe could you elaborate? How can you balance that culture of inclusion with the need for kind of someone to take a little bit of charge to be like leading you in a certain direction? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, of course it does, and that makes sense. And Don't let me misspeak in terms of like we throw a question out vaguely, like what direction should we go, and just let everybody like chime in, right? It's really at that level, and especially in our case in the BPO, because we could have hundreds and thousands of employees at a time, right? In this case, we have 700 right now, and it's how do you reach each of those and what's appropriate conversation for those. So like in the frontline, the agents, the 700, we do surveys often, and we'll survey the group to ask questions about the things that we're trying to solve or things that they do have an impact in, because it's something that is a process in their daily life. And so it's not an all-inclusive question, but it might be, hey, you're on this program with this process that you're doing. What do you think is like slowing us down or a delay there? Where do we get stuck? And we let them tell us, because they're the real world operators of that. Here's where I get stuck, versus top down, where we just go find solutions for what we think will be better. And we hand it to them and they go, yeah, that didn't really help at all. It just has more colors, right? And so the key there is how you frame the questions to which levels, right? And the next thing I do with that is I empower or reward early movers. So when I'm trying to transition a company or start one for investors or grow one, in our case here at the Work Loop, it's about here's a vision and a direction, and we've worked together and set a plan. Now who's jumping on it and moving in action? Who's getting the results from that? And I want to recognize them and empower them, because then everybody sees, look, if you go that direction and we're all rowing the right way, that's positive. So really empower early movers once you set the plan.
What are examples of those rewards or things that you do to celebrate those early movers? Because that's interesting and I like it. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I'd be curious to know, what are some examples?
The funny thing, we do a survey every year, or I do, and with the company, and it's really about rank these things 1 through 10 that are most important to you, right? And I say that to tell you that money is never number one. It's always 3 or 4. Everybody wants career path, development, environment, all those things. And then of course, we work for money, right? But the way we reward is sometimes it's simple recognition. Sometimes it's calling people out, putting them on the screen to the company and saying, hey, these guys are doing a great job leading the charge for us, right? Sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it's quarterly things. Sometimes with front lines for us, we do an annual like circle of excellence, right? If you've performed at a certain level on your program throughout the year, we do things. That might be a weekend trip. That might be a series of things that we give away. So there's a range, right? From just very simple appreciative recognition to all the way through to something more extravagant. It just depends on, where you're at with how you're rolling your plan out.
Samir, Alan, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you do it differently? I'd be curious.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on the point that I said, right? Like there has, again, okay, let's put it into a perspective, right? We have a hierarchy in a company, right? And if I'm very sure that somebody who is going to tell me to do something, let's say even a simple, like we want to install Salesforce in the company, right? So that we don't have to use any of the Excel sheets and 100 Excel sheets we don't have to use, right? Does it make my employee feel that I am going to be more productive? Or is it going to make them feel that I can be eliminated from the mix, right? That's the biggest challenge, which I have seen with most of the companies, right? Now, most often when I have had a word with different organizations, even a simple application, and they want them to use they want their employee to use those applications, employees reject it outright, right? Because they all think that it is going to add something else on the plate, and they can be telling them all the good morally things, right? That it is going to better your life and all good things that management can say. The issue that I see and the approach that I have seen working well for the companies are not the incentives, but the facts, right? Which is last year XYZ people did this software. They use software, and now their team is earning more money. They're getting more bonuses. So it's basically projection of soft power by showing a POC rather than a wide range of application and implementation in the company, because then nobody knows where is the truth and what it is going to do. If they can see that last year a team of 100 people did something and nobody got fired, everybody got great bonus, and everybody is able to do much more work The rest of the people usually follow it. It's basically herd mentality, just like herd immunity. You just need to make sure that most of the people buy in, so that your 20, 30, 40% who were not buying in your idea tend to start following those people. And under the, let's use the term peer pressure, they start using or aligning themselves with the vision that executives have.
Alan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, and I'm gonna pick on both Samir and Josh a little bit, just because you guys are, heading companies and leading organizations. What I've seen is the executive levels are more keyed in on the results. And when you talk about KPIs and metrics, have we achieved where we said we wanted to go? And I applaud you, Josh, on the recognition program and really getting the early adopters, that recognition. And I agree the monetary piece of it is not necessarily the priority that people really want, because as Samir knows, it's really about the human elevation and, really that recognition of seeing their name, on the screen as, people walk through, the cafeteria or, wherever the common area is. But when the leadership team focuses on the end result and those metrics, have we made it through? I think we miss the journey that the team goes through. And kind of Samir kind of alluded to that when we talk about you need to change to, and use your example, go to Salesforce, and how people believe that there's more added to it. If you look at the entire process and that value stream and you say, okay, here is the value throughout, and these are the things that we're going to stop doing, and these are the things that we're going to start doing that are going to add value. And looking at that journey, people will be able to buy in a little bit more, because now they're seeing that I used to do 10 things. And even though you're telling me you're talking, okay, 15 things, but I'm going to lose along that journey, I'm going to lose 8 things. And so if you don't look at the journey and you don't recognize where the value is and those touch points within how do we get there, I think the team loses a little bit of that objectivity, because they're not seeing, how they're going to actually be productive, add value, and really uh, get to the business objective. And that's really what we want to try and do, is we want to try and tie that end result. Josh is, saying, hey, we're going to save this amount of money, or we're going to have this much productivity, we're going to, have this much revenue at the end of the day. Seeing how that accumulates through the process is what I think is also important.
I think to pile on that a little bit, Alan, and maybe throw us in a bit of a tailspin, I just believe with a lot of across many companies in most industries, right? There's enough repetitiveness, and AI has gotten to a point where it's good enough. If you're not thinking or investing strategically as AI is part of your plan to enhance what your humans are doing, you're starting to fall behind competitively, right? Just in efficiency and in things like that, like making life easier for employees. Like we can install something that's flipping things for you, right? It gets you where you need to go, and now you're there and you do your work rather than twice the time it used to take, right? So that's one of the ways that we show people as well that are within our teams that we're investing in you by trying to figure out technologies of the future as well, to make things easy. It's not to replace, it's to enhance, and so I think we can do that to help them have easier work days as well, right?
Right.
This is that what you're bringing up, Josh. I got to write a note that I got to come back to. But what you're bringing up is right into Samir's point that he brought up at the very beginning of expectations versus reality, and I love it. Samir, you just laid it all on the line, and I agree with you totally on the point of so often executives will add to employees' plates but not take anything off. They're like, oh, this person's only working at like 50% productivity anyways, right? We can just throw like a few extra things on their plate and not take anything off. They'll figure it out. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
shit, they're just drinking pina coladas all day. Like, they're just like, what do they do all day anyways? Like, I don't see them, so I assume they're just not working. I'm being silly and very like
Or
goofy.
they work from home, right? Yeah.
They're
So
working from
They work
home,
from
like
home.
they're
Yeah.
taking naps and watching TV shows. Like,
right, right,
that you're
right.
just paying for their Netflix account. Like, I mean, geez, they could stand to take on a couple more things. I think that it's totally fair. I don't see what they do in their life. This is me being just way over the top.
Yeah.
But the point I'm getting at is that's not the case in most circumstances, and more often than not, you got your team that's trying to get things done. You got an executive team that's trying to potentially experiment with new things to see if they're more efficient. But the issue within that is the executive team doesn't want to let go of what this person's already or what these people are already doing. But they're like, I do want to experiment to see if this new way of doing things is more efficient, and then maybe you could drop some things off. But if it's not more efficient, I don't want to have lost all the progress of you stopping doing those things. So to your point, Josh, of, how do we remove this fear that some new change not only will replace them, but that like we're doing this at the behest of an experiment our executive team is trying to run, which they very well could be wrong. And if they're wrong, who's the one who pays the consequences? Not the executive team, I do.
Mhm.
And so I'm looking at this and being like, dang, am I willing to risk my livelihood for this, new experiment this my CEO is
Yeah.
trying to run here? But anyways, what are your thoughts?
And it's back to inclusion and early movers, right? So through the inclusion, you find out who's willing to test with you, right? And use this software and show and be the live example, and then you can show those results to the rest of the team, right? And that's where it's like, let's test this, let's show how it works, let's show how it makes life easier. If it doesn't, we'll admit it, right? Like, we're not trying to add something back to Samir's point. Let's not let you think we're those leaders. Let's test this, because we always want to be trying to get better. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it's better, we'll agree together, and then you can be a champion to the rest of the team, right? The inclusion and early mover part. Right. I don't know
I
if
think to that, from I thought sustainability. And when we talk about quickly trying things out, and I'm as a Kaizen leader and Kaizen coach, we want to try things very quickly so we can learn. And we learn so we can get better. What has happened in the past, and I go historically, I started my career in GE, so you can kind of get an idea of where my culture began. But
Mhm.
there were a lot of ideas that came down from leadership that didn't stick, and it wasn't because it didn't necessarily work, but we didn't necessarily have the leadership inclusion
Mhm.
in that effort and in that transformation. And so if leaders, just throw out the end zone that says, hey, this is where I want you to go figure it out and let's see what happens. But if leaders are not along the way in that journey, then it becomes just that, well, we tried it, didn't work, so we're going to move on. And now employees and resources get to, oh, they're trying another thing, so we'll give it a shot for a while, and then they'll go away, and then we'll go back to doing what we were doing, at the beginning.
Mhm.
That's not necessarily how to get transformation and get change. The leaders have to also be in the trenches. They have to do the Gemba. They have to be there with the team as they are going through that journey.
Yeah.
Great. I'll just go a little off tangent here, right? When we run an organization, right, there are two kinds of organization we can run, which is very democratic organization where everyone is a part of decision-making process, or a very dictatorship, right, which is, or let's call it good word, authoritarian, right, instead of dictatorship. Uh, so very authoritarian, right? That
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it anyway, right? And I guess that's where we are headed with the AI in place, right? Today, in today's day on age, AI can write like 80% of the software, right? and just 20% of the work is needed. So do I truly need everyone in my organization to work on it, right? The answer is no, because at the end of the day, I want to make money also for my business, right? And again, I'm just being the devil's advocate, right? I'm not saying the layoff should
Yeah.
happen, but it is pertinent. It will happen, right? The issue is people who have been working in same technology stack for 10, 15 years, that's not relevant anymore because everything has changed. Market has changed. You all might have seen after COVID, the selling has changed, the marketing has changed, right? We never thought in our wildest dream that people can sell anything on TikTok, but now people are selling it on TikTok. I don't need a 50-year-old marketing guy sitting in my company because he doesn't know how to run TikTok, right? I need 22 years old, right? And then same goes for the sales also, right? We have steak dinner was very common thing in the sales meeting, right? We'll go out for the dinners, we'll have our whiskeys and we'll sell the software and we'll make good friend, right? But now meetings are happening on Zoom, right? How I'm supposed to have steak dinner and have a glass of whiskey on a Zoom meeting, right? So the market and the methodology has changed, right? Now, if I'm running a very democratic company, right, where I want everybody to be part of it and every single person is my family, yes, I will include them in the decision making process, but that will hurt my company much more than anything else, than basically going and saying that go do this experiment. If you can learn this thing, it's okay. If not, then I'll find people who can learn this technology tools, who can transform my business much faster, much quicker, and get me on a revenue plan which I'm projecting or which my competitors are projecting, because those companies are being run by 22, 23, 24 years old and were kicking my ass, and I have like equal number of experience in the market. But if my company, if my employees are not able to transform it or attain those skills, what I'm good at. At the end of the day, it's all business, right? I'm not running a society where I want everybody to be happy. Most of the people will be unhappy, but I guess that's what makes a company successful if I have the revenue. So, being said that, I think the business transformation is, yes, one element is getting the buy-in. And second method that I also think, apart from the POC, that I can do a proof of concept with a set of people and then don't hamper or harm them in any way. Or I can do a forced POC, which is everybody has to do it. So, because I am running my company, I am at the end of the day, all of the leader is the most isolated and the lonely place in the world, also. Because if anything bad happens, nobody is going to go to the third line of the manager and saying that why it didn't happen, because the first axe will be on the leader, why you couldn't manage a team of 100, 200, 300, 400 people. Yeah. So, that's where my thoughts are, right? One is small POC and second is forced buy-in. Everybody has to do it or face the consequences.
Here's a crazy idea. I'm hearing what you guys are saying. I think, I think this concept of getting that buy-in from the team, from an executive where maybe it feels like there's not a lot of accountability there. What do you guys think about this? This is crazy. This is just like off the top of my head that I was just thinking about while you guys were chatting and sharing. What would your thoughts be on if an executive comes to the team and says, "Hey, I want you to try doing this new thing or operating this new way of working." Them also sharing what they're accountable for if they're wrong.
Right.
I don't know, is that a crazy? I mean, what do you like? Does it when I say that, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's very common in the startup world that I have seen, right? Because in the startup world, your team is very small, right? Let's say you are a 100-employee company, right? And where if you come with very human angle. You know all 100 of them, and you know their family, and they know you, and they know your family. So you can come and be very vulnerable with them, right? But the issue is when this 100 become 1,000, right? Then you don't know most of it, right? And they might or might not be able to relate with you, right? Because they don't know you well enough to say that you are actually being vulnerable, or you are just trying to portray vulnerability because you read somewhere or saw a TED talk that, yes, this is how a manager should be or the leader should be, right? So this is, again, I think what we are talking about should be divided into segment of how many employees you have in your company, right? If it is 10, you you can say and do whatever you want. You are not going to lay them off. If it is 100, it's still easier to get all the buy-in. But I think once it reaches 1,000 and above, right? I think vulnerability doesn't affect that much on your set of employees or the group of employees. That's what my take is. I might be 100% wrong, but that's what I have seen.
And I think it's somewhat an industry and a who's your customer, right? Like in our case, where we're, you know, B2B and what I'll call like high ticket sales versus what some softwares, it's a different model to sell it, right? So, you know, where our sales cycle might be 6 to 18 months to close a deal and that sort of thing. So that's the hard part, right? It's harder to get one deal. Like if you get 4 a year, you're happy and things are good versus, you know, mass software or something like that. But I think the employee model has changed as well. And COVID started the kickoff of changing everything, where a lot of call it government offices, health programs, things like that were always, because of HIPAA or other certifications, would say, no, we can't work from home. You got to be on site, you got to be secure, you got to be level 1, you know, ISO, all those things, right? Well, then COVID hits and everybody gets sent home, and everybody had to decide, are we shutting down or are we going to figure out how to do business? And it required those clients to loosen up or find a secure way for us to do business. What that also did is allow employees freedom and a little bit of leverage, because they, instead of now working from within the radius I'm willing to go on site for and drive every day, I can work for a company across the world doing about the same thing if I like how they treat me a little better. And so we have to work very hard in our case on culture, especially within the BPO market, because, you know, it's a $150 trillion industry and there's, you know, 2 on every corner, and agents can leave if they don't like how you're treating them, or they don't like your environment, or they don't like their career path, or any number of those ancillary things that back when we could come out and say, this is the direction we're going, everybody row that way, because they didn't have a lot of other choices. Nowadays, everybody has choices, and they're like, if I don't like your boat, I'm getting in that one. And so that's where I think we have to work really hard on culture and buy-in, because if they feel like they're part of the solution, part of the day, they want to stay there where they're welcome, right? Versus just a number. And I get it. We get to 10,000 agents. That's really hard. And we have to create a bunch of book clubs and running clubs and this and that and whatever to keep people in. You know, I get it. It's full-time jobs, but it has to be done because that's the market today. Like when you look at real estate buyers versus sellers market in the employment world, I think it's an employee market right now, because they have all the leverage in terms of they can work anywhere in the world. And so it's really tough, at least in our industry, right? Some are on site and it's business as usual, but for us, that's the things we face in terms of, you know, not only do I attract the best talent, but how do I keep them here instead of just paying them through the roof? Because also in our business, there's a lot of downward pressure on price. And so, you know, it's not that we own a product that we can just sell more of, right? We're a service. And so it's a little bit difficult in our case, I think.
You know, Josh, you talk about a lot about this concept of inclusion, and you talk about surveys
I
to
think
get. Oh yeah, jump in, Al.
Oh yeah, I was just going to adding to your question. I think, you know, with leaders showing humility and really saying, okay, I am going to be accountable, you know, if there are any mistakes. But I think they're not necessarily accountable for the mistakes. I think, you know, the leader has the full accountability, right? And being humble and showing that vulnerability, I think on the other hand, will build some trust, have some authenticity, if you will, that, you know, the leader understands what, you know, we need to do and has some experience in I would say failing, not actually achieving the goal. But again, I think when we can try things and be quick learners, just as, you know, Josh was talking about it in terms of, you know, when COVID hit, we had to, you know, really make some shifts to say, okay, how do we continue business? Well, we had to change the model, you know, the approach and the culture to the market and how those products and services would continue to flow needed to change. And so, It was just, an artifact of our environment. But and when we can adapt, I think the quick adapters, the flexible adapters, and when leaders flow down what that accountability is, and through, their executive team, through the, upper middle management, through middle management down to the floor, I think is when you can really get that buy-in and start building a lot of that momentum, and really people start to care, because that's really what you want. You really want the organization. And I understand what you're talking about, Samir. You really don't want to have a huge business of family and friends where everything is out there. You've got to have somebody leading the ship. There's got to be somebody that at the end of the day is responsible for the final decision.
Mhm.
No matter what the input is, and whether it's democratic or authoritarian, somebody's got to make that final decision and be accountable for that decision.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like Samir says, at some point we make the decision and go. For example, like as a COO, right? I know that profit, loss, happiness, sadness, everything about it ends with me. But that inclusion provides me real-time data points from people doing the work that I can make better decisions with, right?
Right, right,
And
absolutely.
it gets it to me faster than doing research or living it myself or things like that. And so it's really, yeah, we all as leaders, like we know, right? If it doesn't work, it's me.
Right,
But we're just trying to get as much good information as we can to make those decisions.
But I
right.
guess what happens when the data's wrong? And I only say this, here's an example. Here's a perfect example. I was chatting with the chief people officer recently. She was sharing, she surveyed her team. They were all like, oh yeah, we love to get like a subscription to LinkedIn Learning. We love to, have training modules to help us with our development of for ourselves and learning new skills and stuff like that. Oh yeah, we're so on board. So she goes out, buys a license for everybody at the company to have it. And then 2 months goes by, not a single person has gone through a single module. Survey says 98% of the employees are on board. Oh yeah, we want it. And then actual application is they just didn't do it. So what happens when the survey data you're collecting and you're taking stock into doesn't lead to the actual, application or usage that you were hoping for?
I'll step out on a limb and say initially I would say there's a culture issue there because
Oh,
to the
possibly.
boss you're not going to tell her you don't want to learn. So you're like, yeah, we'd love to have that stuff. We'll do it. But as a human individual, it's really hard to get yourself to study or learn something that you really don't have an intent to or whatever, right? And so it's a good product with no plan. And
That's a
so there
great,
has to be
great
an
response.
additional rollout of how you're going to use that, what the expectations are for using that. And even, like I said earlier, an early mover rewards for using it, right? First 10 people to get certification get whatever, right? Whatever that is for your company. And so, you just do things like that and start to help make it a habit and show that as a leader, I'm okay too that you're taking those classes. Like, I'm okay if you spend 2 hours a week of your work days, right? Go ahead and set yourself a meeting and go do your thing. We're investing in you. So there probably needs to be additional conversation and then just an openness between those two for an employee to know. Like when I send my head of marketing something that I've written in the morning, I'm like, hey, this sounded like a great idea at 6:30 this morning. Tell me if the idea sucks and you hate it, right? Like I'm not just going to throw it out there. And
Yeah.
so, we have to have a plan for how we're going to put things in place, I think, too.
I think that's very
I agree
important. I
with the
think
approach. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think there's a there's a distinct difference between strategy and plan. We can say we're going to do this, and using your example, we're going to provide a learning platform using LinkedIn. Okay, that's great. So everybody's got it, but the plan of execution and the plan of monitoring, measuring, and rewarding has not been put in place, and so you get that. Being from a quality perspective, I try and make decisions with data, and oftentimes data can be wrong, but you have to go with what the data is telling you at that time. Now, what you need to learn very quickly is that you have the wrong data, and you need to understand what is the right data and how do you go get that right data. What can we build the plan on that is a little more accurate? again, to get us to where we want to be, to get us to meet that strategy.
Great. Yeah, I'll just add on to it, right? Which is we call it RCA, root cause analysis, right? That is something every leader must do on whatever they are doing, right? If let's say they got like, as you were saying, I'll just piggyback on the idea of LinkedIn learning, right? Everybody says that they want to get upskill. You got like 100,000 licenses, and out of that, 1% is barely used, right? The issue is then the survey doesn't stop there. Survey stops when you have the highest number of adoption and you are able to measure the change in your organization. Then the survey stops. What happens for most of the company is survey is only for the first part, which is do you need it or not? And based on that, people take decision, right? The decision should always be, did I see any change from the first survey to the last point where I added a system or a tool or processes in the place, and did it actually impacted my organization in some way, be it positive, be it negative, but it has to impact, and that also have to survey. So you're very right, Garrett. Data can tell you a very big lie, but it depends on how you have collected the data, which is if you have not collected it till the end point, it is you're just looking at half of the truth, which is yes, the need was there, but maybe LinkedIn learning was not the solution. Maybe the team building exercise was not the solution. And that's where the leader has to come and do the RC. And that's what they get paid for, right? So uh, yeah, that's my 2 cents on it.
I like it. Guys, this was great.
Say, wait, hold on, Gary. So you hit on a really touchy point for me, the root cause analysis. And what I've seen a lot of times, and sorry, Josh, I'm putting you in this bucket over here, is leaders tend to want to stop at a symptom and not really find the root cause. They see the first reason within the culture and they want to go change that reason in the culture. And then 6 to 9 months down the road, something happens very similar. And they say, well, why didn't it work? I thought we fixed that. Well, you really didn't get to the root cause. You didn't think it through, and your data led you down a different road that possibly you should have. So, sorry, it's from a quality standpoint that's really personal to me of really training and teaching, coaching how to do root cause analysis and finding out how to correct them. So. Sorry. Thank you, Samir, but I apologize, Garrett,
No,
for
you
my
don't be
tangent
apologetic.
there.
This was good.
And
Guys, this has been a
using
great
you, Josh,
conversation.
as a
Yeah, Alan, Josh, Samir, this has been great. You guys have been great. This has been a really good pre-symposium panel. I feel like we've hit some really great topics and insights here. So if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, I want to meet these three great leaders, come to our executive symposium next week, 5 to 8 p.m. in Dallas. I'll post the link on how to RSVP in the comments of this post. But anyways, thank you for your time.